All guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0 brought to us by the official beer of the program. You know we're talking Johnny Cuba. Go pick up a six-pack of Johnny. That's how you're going to enjoy the weekend. You got Dolphins this weekend. There's a lot happening. Football tonight. Go to johnnycuba.us. You use the Johnny locator. You find the nearest location to you. Make sure you always drink responsibly. And don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra, stay tranquilo. So joining us now is our pal, San LeBatard Show. FanDuel Sports Network, Marlins, Jeremy Taché here with us. So, true story, all right. I've told this, I've mentioned this on the podcast here that the Marlins get no attention. All right. I will not give the Marlins any of my attention. I am out for this year. And I've never really like my attention waned last year, but this year, like, I was completely out. And then, like, 3 or 4 weeks ago, there was one morning where we're getting ready for a production meeting for the LeBatard Show. And Jeremy, you know, it's in the midst of like this Marlins streak. And Jeremy says, "Hey, did you watch the Marlins last night?" And I said, I said, it's funny you asked that because for the very first time this season, like 2 or 3 days ago, I've started to put on the Marlins, not on the main TV, but I'm putting them on the small TV in the Zaslow Mansion family room. And I have actually been keeping track. And since then, so that's a few weeks ago, I do have the Marlins now on my small TV every single night, keeping track of what's going on. And you know what? I'd imagine there's a lot of people who are doing the same.
Yeah, look, it's changed completely in terms of I went to a camp that I volunteer at the beginning of last week, and for the first time ever, like ever, I had counselors coming up to me right when camp started. Hey, man, like, how about the Marlins? Like, what they're doing is unbelievable. And I was expressing to some people, they were 55-55 after that Yankees series, and the way people are talking about it, if they had just been a 500 team all year, yes, it would be a really cool story and it would have been overachieving in the same way that it's been thus far this season. But to have it be this like insane run where they were 16 games under 500 in the middle of June. Right now, they sit 2 games under after the loss to the Braves last night. That is insane for a team that simply was not supposed to be this competitive. And they're entertaining. They're in every game. Even in the loss last night, they gave up 2 runs in the first inning. Then they score 5 runs on their own coming back in the second inning, really putting themselves in a good position. Ultimately, they go up 6-2. A bad call on what should have been a strikeout leads to a guy getting on base by walk. They give up the 3-run homer. Ultimately, they blow it late with their relievers, who have been so good throughout the majority of the season. But they're incredibly entertaining. They're incredibly competitive. And no matter how the rest of the season goes, that is I think, really big shock for not only people locally, but certainly people nationally, where I remember The Athletic before the season was writing an article of reaching out to all these different people around baseball saying, can you name 3 Miami Marlins? Right. And now they're having a pretty remarkable season led by Kyle Stowers. And it's been really fun to watch. And for me, selfishly, first season, you know, as an in-game reporter with the broadcast, it's been really special.
So has the team's MO then changed maybe going into next year, where obviously they held on to Sandy Alcantara at the trade deadline, which was the right move because, I mean, selling low, why would you sell low, you know? So, right. But has their MO changed then where, okay, I mean, Sandy is under he's under contract and it's at a really good price. And if the team can finish this year like a 500 team, you got young players who should continue to ascend. Like, maybe it doesn't make sense to trade Sandy Alcantara at all.
I think that the reality is that Peter Bendix and the Marlins front office have standards. They have an actual understanding of what their players' values are. They know their strengths and their weaknesses. It's exemplified by their ability to do what many would consider dart throws and have those guys work out, right? Liam Hicks was a Rule 5 pick who had never played above the AA level. They selected him knowing he would need to be with the team the entire year or he'd be returned back to his previous team. He's been a revelation. He was leading all rookies in RBIs for a huge portion of this season. Otto Lopez, their starting shortstop, who's been phenomenal, DFA'd in February. They pick him up. Not only does he start at second base and thrive, but when Xavier Edwards needs to go back to second because he'd been struggling at short, slots in at short, has been one of the best defensive shortstops in baseball. They've made all of those little moves. So when they were going into this deadline and they had Edward Cabrera available and Sandy Alcantara available and Jesus Sanchez available and several others, with Sanchez, they got the package they wanted. They got 3 players, one really young project who's 19, who's been ripping the ball in his first 4 games in Jupiter, one major league level pitcher who don't know for sure, but my bet would be might be a guy who gets called up this weekend to make one of these starts in the doubleheader tomorrow, and another player who's toolsy in the middle infield. But with Sandy and Edward Cabrera, they never got the package they wanted. They demanded a certain level, and it didn't reach that. So they said, we're playing good ball. We're going to keep these guys. They'll reassess in the winter. There is a chance that one or both of those players ultimately get traded, because the way this is going to work in Miami is going to be similar to Tampa. Their plan and their hope is to not only draft well, but develop players better than anyone else, at least as well as anyone else, and be able to constantly churn through to where they ultimately pick, I would say, every 4 or 5 years, their 3 or 4 or 5 players who they deem worthy of the long-term extensions. And then every other position, it will be, as guys approach arbitration, they get moved for younger players of value who slot back into that farm system because they know they have the next guy coming. So the perfect example being with those pitchers and Sandy and Edward Cabrera. Hey, man, Robbie Snelling, a 21-year-old, shoving at AAA. Thomas White, their number 1 prospect, shoving at AA as a 20-year-old. They know those guys are almost there, and they're going to continue to cycle from there. So that's really the premise, and the things that they're doing behind the scenes to develop these guys. It has been fascinating to learn what's going on behind the scenes in their player development.
Tell us a little bit about Jacob Marcy. He's obviously not going to hit 500. All right, they got him in the Luis Ariz trade. What is he projected to be?
Well, the irony with Marcy is he wasn't even supposed to be the prize jewel of that trade. Dylan Head, who's currently in Jupiter, young kid, crazy athletic, like unbelievably athletic. Watching him play center field when I was over in Jupiter working on, we did a Marlins farm system show throughout the year where I took a stop at each of the different ballparks, and Dylan Head has an opportunity to be a pretty special player. Nathan Martorella, another piece of that trade, now just called up to play first base for the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp at AAA. Marcy, the thing that they loved about him from the very beginning, athletic, really good defensive center fielder, could steal bases, and the thing that they loved was his plate discipline. The thing that they felt that they needed to improve was his ability to drive the ball. It wasn't just, hey, try to hit singles and get on and steal bases. We think you're a big, strong guy. You have the opportunity to get even stronger. Once they acquired him in May of last year, they sent him into a strength and conditioning program. He's put on some muscle, and they worked on his swing with the pure intention. I mean, you could see it. It's a nice, short, compact swing straight to the ball. But they worked on him driving the ball, getting some air under it, being able to, we've seen he had his first career homer, ton of extra base hits and
he's already walking a ton.
And that's the big thing. They knew that was the thing that would translate. And when I spoke to Clayton McCullough about it. And basically what Clayton said is like, look, it is one thing to have a really good eye, right? But if you have a really good eye, teams will figure out, oh, we can just throw strikes. And if you can't do damage with it, even if it's just singles, we'll just throw you a bunch of strikes. Honestly, that was the approach with Luis Ariz. Luis Ariz doesn't really strike out, but teams are comfortable with the idea of, yeah, look, he's going to hit close to 400 sometimes, but if all we're doing is giving up singles, so long as it's in the right portions of the game, he's not a guy who steals bases.
So was that the line of thinking that Bendix had when they moved on from Ariz? Like, it's great that he hits 330, but he's just slapping the ball.
Look, there's a reason why Ariz. I loved watching Luis Ariz play. He's a throwback of a player to a time that all of us love watching from baseball. And he's valuable, right? Like, he's valuable to a team also for who he is. He's a great person, but the Marlins have a certain approach that they want to take at the plate. So does a lot of Major League Baseball. There's a reason Arias was traded back-to-back seasons. He was traded from the Twins to the Marlins. He was traded from the Marlins to the Padres, and he led the league in hitting in all of those seasons. And it didn't really matter to a lot of people. The Padres shopped him this offseason, and nobody really bit, and so they kept him. And the reality is he's a great hitter, but his value in the modern game is a little bit different. And so when they saw Marcy as a guy with great plate discipline and they felt room to grow, they did a lot of those development things I was just talking about in the minor league system. And he's gone from a guy who they were hoping, a lot of people viewed as like, all right, a hopeful fourth outfielder because he's good defensively and can steal some bases to, he looks like he will be a staple of this team moving forward, a really good young player.
So how many of these guys who are in the everyday lineup right now are guys that it seems could actually be part of the core of this team?
So I think that there are several, right? Agustin Ramirez is the first and foremost. He is someone they will build around. Now, defensively, he really does struggle behind the plate. I think they're going to have to, in this offseason, work with him there, maybe even try to work on a little bit of first base with him. But even if Agustin Ramirez is a career DH, he's going to be above the value of your average DH. He is a monster at the plate. And what he's doing as a rookie, they called him up in May with the idea of sending him right back down 2 weeks later. It was just because they had Nick Fortes on the IL and they were like, let's give the kid a taste. And he was so great that they had no choice but to keep him at the major league level. He is a huge piece. Obviously, Kyle Stowers will be a huge piece for them for multiple years moving forward. He's under team control for a little while. He will hit arbitration, I believe, after next year. Maybe that's when things start to change, but I don't think so. They love that guy for, again, that's a great human being.
Could they try and sign him can they try and actually buy out some of those years with a contract this offseason?
So maybe. The reality is that Stowers is 27 years old, right? So he'll be going into his year, or it might even be 28. I'm not entirely sure. That's on me. But he's either 27 or 28 years old, which means he'll be going to his, 28 or 29 season next year with another year and then multiple years of team control. A lot of the time, those guys, you might just want to keep him at whatever their arbitration number is. But if he continues to produce at this level, maybe at the start of next season and he still is playing this type of way, that might be the time where you go, hey, you know what? Maybe we do sign this guy to a bit of a longer term deal and buy him out. But it's a different type of value for a player at that age who knows I might only get one of these contracts than someone like Agustin Ramirez, who is 22 years old and has only recently been signed out of the Dominican Republic. So Xavier Edwards, the second baseman, another guy, table setter, a foundation of what they're doing. Otto Lopez has been a wonderful find. You could see him be a piece of it, and obviously Marcy. But there are so many interchangeable pieces, and the reality is the Marlins are a couple of years ahead of schedule being this competitive. The reality is they thought that they were going to be bad this season. They thought that maybe next season or hopefully next season, there would be some improvements as guys like Marcy came up. Joe Mack, who's waiting in the system, who has an opportunity to be a star as a catcher, a left-handed hitting catcher who has been a monster. Double-A, got promoted to Triple-A, has only, continued to thrive there, really good defensively. Another guy who they believe in, Robbie Snelling, who I mentioned before, potentially coming up, another part of one of those Padres deals.
Where does their farm system rank right now?
I don't even think their farm system is ranked that high, but an example that I could tell you, Baseball America sort of looks at each team in Major League Baseball and puts out essentially scouting reports on however many of their prospects they deem worthy, right? So last year, at around the end of July, they put out a report for the Marlins after their draft, and they had 27 prospects on that list. This year, near the end of July, as the Marlins were approaching 500 on the field, as opposed to 25 games under 500 last year. So mind you, they were selling guys off. 58 guys who they deemed worthy of at least writing a scouting report on. That is a gigantic difference.
Yeah.
And it's in part because of their development. It's in part because of what they have going on at the DR right now. They have 3 or 4 pitchers in their Dominican Academy there's a 16-year-old kid named Kevin DeFrank in 4 or 5 years, maybe even less, let's have this conversation again. Kevin DeFrank, who is right now in their Dominican Summer League, 16-year-old kid throwing 100 miles an hour at like 6'4". He is a monster. And that's one of these players who has skyrocketed up their prospect rankings, but they've developed players to be better. And they're doing some really, really innovative things, including, at the major league level with Connor Norby when they were working on his reaction time. One of the things they did with him is they literally put goggles on him that they've programmed with strobe lights. So he's taking ground balls with strobe lights flashing in his eyes so that you're partially blinded while you're taking these ground balls and you need to just react as quick as you can. He then would walk behind where they had an iPad on a delay with the stats of whatever his reaction time were. You take them off, you look at the stats, you look at the replay of what you did, you go back, you do it again for about 10 to 15 of those. Then you take off the glasses and you go from there. And he went from someone who was at the bottom of the league in reaction time when the season started at third base to about the middle of the pack and had set a career high in reaction time. And it had a few individual reaction times that were top 5 in the league. Those are some of the little things that they're doing where they're focusing, they're applying analytics to the way that they coach. And that is the really interesting element, is when we all say like, oh, they're going to be better at analytics than everybody else because they have Bendix. What does that really mean? His combination with Gabe Kapler, who has so much experience as a coach, being in that front office as the assistant GM, they've been a really wonderful combination playing off of each other to figure out how to set the standard.
All right, so I'm not back, but I'm paying attention.
Nice.
All right. I'm clearly paying attention. Yeah, the last week, Friday night against the Yankees was very exciting.
One of the best games, regular season games in Marlins history. Like crazy. Yeah.
So I'm paying attention. All right. I want to know, did you see something that we've talked about on the show today? And I talked about it on ESPN yesterday. So it was 2 afternoons ago at Citi Field. And Guardians pitcher Gavin Williams, he had a no-hitter, bro. Guardians have not had a no-hitter for 44 years, all right? But this game was not in Cleveland. This game was in Citi Field. And he took a no-hitter into the 9th inning. He got 1 out. Juan Soto hits a home run. He manages to get another out, and then they pull him with 1 out remaining in the game. The crowd at Citi Field gives him a standing ovation. Without tainting your opinion with my opinion, your thoughts on that are what?
I think, well, A, I loved it. B, and I have a feeling you disagree. B, if we're being real, he should have intentionally walked Soto, which totally defeats the purpose of what it is that you're doing with a no-hitter, but he should have intentionally walked Soto to get to Pete Alonso, but that's a separate conversation. And then 3, I think the reason you see it is because it's so rare to see a guy throw 120 pitches these days. I think what they were applauding was Stephen Vogt's reasoning as the Cleveland manager to actually let him chase the no-hitter. How many guys have we seen take a no-hitter into the 6th or 7th and they go, it's the regular season, we don't want to blow out your arm, blah, blah, blah. They left him in there. What was really special, they let him continue to go. Right? They let him continue to go into the rest of the game and throw more pitches. I assumed the moment he gave up a hit, that was going to be it. They were going to hook him. Instead, they let him ride. And to me, I think as much as we like to bag on the Mets, there's a lot of real baseball fans in New York, whether they're Mets fans, they're Yankee fans, they get what's going on in the game. And it was a remarkable performance by a guy who had been nothing but great. And by the way, Mets fans are pissed off at their team right now because they've been hot and cold. So I believe that was their 6th straight loss or 5th straight loss.
It was their 4th at that time. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's led to, I believe, 6. And so in turn, I think there was a little bit of both, right? Where it's like, we're mad at our team. This guy shoved. It's cool to see him throw 120 pitches. I thought it was a really cool moment. You very rarely see that from a road fan base.
There is no scenario where I am giving a standing ovation to the pitcher who ruined my afternoon.
Well, did he? No. How many opportunities?
If I'm a Mets fan, he ruined my afternoon.
No-hitter. Yeah, I get that. But like, I would have given anything to be at the Roy Halladay perfect game against the Marlins.
Can I tell you something?
You were there.
This real quick. Me and my friends, all right, it's a Saturday night, the Roy Halladay game, Marlins, Phillies. My buddies and I, it's like 6 or 7 of us. We're at my friend's house. There's a lot going on that night, the time of year. There was NBA playoffs going on. It must have been like May or June. There's
Yeah.
Stanley Cup playoffs going on. It was a Saturday night, so there was a UFC pay-per-view on, and we got the Marlins. As we're all leaving to go to the game, I said, guys, I'm going to stay here. I want to watch all the stuff going on. There's too much happening here. I'll watch. They all went to the game. Roy Halladay, perfect game.
You missed it just like that.
I stayed at my buddy's house. I watched all the different sports that were going on. They all came back and like, hey, we had the perfect game. I stayed back at the house on the couch watching on TV.
This is my worst version of that is in 2019, I think it was. I had the opportunity. I was so lucky. I was still working as an associate producer at WSVN. They sent me to shoot around when the Warriors were in town because Steve Kerr was inviting some kids from Stoneman Douglas to be there. And that was like a special moment. They wanted to get some sound on, but also we were doing end of career retirement packages that Steve Shapiro would ultimately work on for Dwayne Wade. And so they wanted sound from Steph Curry and Steve Kerr about Dwayne Wade. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I get to go do this. And so really special morning, like to get to talk to those guys about my childhood hero and Dwayne Wade. And my boss was like, hey, if you want, I can also get you a credential for the game tonight. And I was like, all right, like that sounds cool, but realistically, like, man, I'm really behind on laundry. And I feel like I've been scrambling and I don't want to stay down in Miami all day long. I'm going to have to drive back. Like I've been to a bunch of games this year. No big deal. That's the night that Dwayne Wade hits the buzzer beater against the Warriors.
Oh,
and does his final, this is my house. And I'm folding laundry at home and I'm sitting with my brother and he just goes, you are such an asshole for missing this game. An unbelievable game that I chose to miss. So I can at least, it's not a perfect game, but it's a D Wade buzzer beater at the end of his career. It's damn close.
Jeremy, if I'm walking up to the ballpark with my kids, we're going to go to the Mets game. I'm a Mets fan. And I want to have a good time. I want to see my team win, and I want to have a good time.
Yeah.
And I pay money, and I go to the game. And the guy on the other team allowed me to sit there with nothing to cheer about for the entire game. My team had no hits, which equals to no runs. I had a terrible afternoon. I'm going to cheer that guy?
Have you ever had this happen? Because I've been around it before. By like the 7th inning, does it not
Where I start rooting for the other team?
You're not rooting for the other team, but does it not start to be at least a little cool that you're like, hold on a second, I might get a chance to witness history here? No, it doesn't do that for you at all?
No,
yeah,
there's
right.
no scenario.
I'm too much of a baseball dork, I think. I think that's just me being a nerd.
And my team, if I'm the Mets, again, and my team is in the wild card. They're in a divisional race. Okay?
No, that's the part.
When Gavin Williams is coming up the mountain, Jeremy, I'm booing him. I'm not giving him a standing ovation.
I'm sure there were some boos. I'm sure there were. But you're right. I look, that's totally fair. That's probably the right take. I just thought it was it's almost like how crazy it was that a couple of years ago we saw the Phillies fans who literally are like the meanest people in the world, boo Santa Claus, yada, yada, yada. All of a sudden, because Trey Turner had been struggling so much, decide to be empathetic out of nowhere and give him a standing O. And then all of a sudden, he had like the best final month of his entire career because he had this really like odd moment. That was a hometown team and hometown fans, but they were almost ironically cheering for him and trying to just break him out of this stuff. It kind of reminds me of that where you're like, are they supposed to be doing this right now? It doesn't make a ton of sense.
There's no scenario I'm cheering for the other team or for other players. Jeremy, excellent job. Tell everybody all the ways they can catch anything that you're doing.
Thank you, Zaz. Well, they can watch me with you oftentimes on the Dan LeBatard Show with Stu Gatz. We also, if you're a baseball fan, if you enjoyed the baseball portions of what we just talked about, I have a show for the LeBatard Show called The Pitch Clock. And it is our baseball show every week. It has a little bit of nostalgic baseball trivia. I bring in an expert analyst. This week, it was Kyle Seeloff, the voice of the Marlins. We talked a little Marlins. We talked a little bit about some other teams over in the AL. But it has its own YouTube playlist on the LeBatard Show YouTube. Please go and watch those YouTube videos. You can go back because the trivia is timeless. So you can go back and watch every single episode, and it's really fun to play along. If you want to, go ahead and tweet at me or DM me on Instagram with how you did. And then also tune in to Miami Marlins games because I am an in-game reporter. I will be there for every single game of the next homestand, and then ultimately back with the Miami Heat once that season starts.
Jeremy, you said it all. Excellent job. Thanks for hanging out with us today.
Thank you, Zaz.